Mhm.
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of Unity Through Diversity. And this is a special series that I bring the readers from all over the world, tap into collective energy and give a collective reading. And let's welcome Peace Dealer, aka Peace Dealer, right? And your real name is Michael, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And Peace Dealer is not the first time on this podcast. That's why I was joking when I saw where he is. He literally, do you have Virgo in your charts? Where's Virgo in your placement?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about not having as much Earth in your chart. I
Yeah.
have a majority Earth in my chart, but it's all in Capricorn and Taurus, and I have nothing in
Ooh.
Virgo. So with no Virgo, like I'm not socially conscious. I don't notice the details. I don't really. It takes a while before I like, okay, time to clean
Realize.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. The perspective of the real, but I do have the Taurian quality. I do have the Capricorn order and direction, but putting it all together in Virgo and really being social with it and integrating it is a challenge. So definitely embracing that
Well,
and
see, we
whatnot.
are very different. If you like, my living room changed multiple times. Every 3 months, I will change things moving because otherwise, and a Virgo is in my, I think it's fourth house is my,
Yep.
it's a home,
As
right?
a
It's a
Cancer
home.
rising, it's your third house, but for Geminis, the Virgo is our fourth house.
Yeah, that's why I'm sometimes like I'm confused about a Virgo English, which but I treat that's because more resonate in my fourth, which is the home, because I have a lot of plants in my house because that's the earth energy. I bring a lot of earth. That's a lot of plants in kitchen and everywhere with me right now. But yeah, let's touch on today. We're gonna talk about a lot of important dates in June because I feel personally have a lot of feeling a lot of change shift already happened. So I think when like before we jump on Zoom, like I was kind of tapping into the energy, see how we can unpack this thing. So in human world, we still have this timeline, right? Past, present, future. And I feel like in a way that we can touch on. Of course, you if you want to feel in a different way to unfold, feel free to because like just logical mind, right? Like Gemini, I don't know whether Gemini is very logical, but I know Gemini like to study things, right? So,
Mhm.
we can touch on something like what happened, right? What already happened. Like it doesn't matter the older world or what's going on. Then we go into what is happening and what's going to happen, right? Uh, but how do you feel? How do you feel this train of the flow, or we can.
No, that's perfect. That was literally what I was gonna do too when it was time to show. So we're on the same page, which
Great.
is beautiful.
Okay. So let's see what happened. Okay. But before we jump in, because we already had 15 minutes of discussion before we even hit the recording button, because I asked a question I always want to ask people, but I don't even know who to ask because it's such a complicated question. So my
Yeah.
question for Peace Dealer was, I born on cusp, right? I'm like Cancer, Gemini, depends on who asked me and which day I'm falling on. So I have a hard time to explain my birthday, hard time to explain my sun, moon, rising, and a hard time sometimes to relate where my, all these things fall apart to. So how would you suggest people if people are born on cusp like me, they're not necessarily be Cancer, Gemini, they might be somewhere. So how they even tap into their energy wise in a simple way because there's astrology is not easy. If you understand, you understand. If you don't understand, it's such a
Right.
complicated
It could be a
topic.
lot.
Yeah.
No, a really great question. There's so much confusion around about it because people share all their opinions and ideas. A lot of like ideas around it have just been kind of shared as if or passed down as if it's true. For example, the idea where like, oh, if you're born within these dates, you're on the cusp, and being born in the cusp, you like feel the quality of both signs and whatnot. None of these things are actually true.
Mm.
And the reason why there's truth to it, as far as maybe feeling the blending of one sign leaving into another sign, but the date you're born doesn't determine your sign, it's the actual degree. So, this is why
Mm.
you need to know your time of birth, your date of birth, the cusp, really, because there's 29 degrees to each sign. Each sign goes from 0 to 29, but you can alternatively switch that from 1 to 30 degrees. So 0 degrees of a sign could also be 30 degrees of the previous sign.
Mm.
So the cusp would be 29 degrees, 0, and 1 degree of the next sign. That 0 degree point would really be the true cusp. So if you're born on 29 degrees, you're born as the master of that zodiac sign. If you're born at 1 degree, you're born initializing the next sign. Zero is really going to be that true cusper point, but we
Mhm.
still will count it as that wild card point into the next sign. 30 degrees of the previous sign, 0 degrees of the next sign. This is where you could argue that the mastery of one sign shifts into the next sign. For example, with Gemini and Cancer, the master as Gemini is going to represent your thought process that manifests Cancer, the blowing of the winds that you think and stimulates your emotions and how you'll develop your feelings in what direction. So you could say that they do kind of connect there, but a lot of talk around cusps are spoken by people who don't understand really the mathematical precision of the
Mm.
by degree. Because, for example, because of the precession of the equinoxes and because of how everything isn't exactly 100% consistent, June 22nd, for example, can fall on 0 degrees or it can fall on 29 degrees. Like the same date everyone is born each year is going to fall
Mm.
on subtly different degrees. That might be on the 0 degree cusp, that might be on 1 or 29 degrees. So you have to know the exact degree. And finally, progressed charts are also a play. So you might be born 29 degrees in a sign, but in a year, you're going to progress 0 degrees into the next sign because every year you're born or every year you have your birthday, the
Mhm.
sun degree you were born with moves a degree. The moon degree moves a degree every month in relation to the daily transits. The sun moves a degree every day, 2.5 days. The moon moves every to the next sign. So this is why it could feel like you're a part of the cusp because you may have progressed into the next sign within the first, 2 or 3 years. But knowing the exact degree is crucial, and that will
Man,
really clear.
wow. Okay, so does that make sense? So does that make sense? Because you say the sun every year they move 1 degree, right?
Yeah, for the progress chart, great question.
For
So
progression. So let's say the year I was born, let's say, sun is in Gemini, right? 29 degrees.
29
So
degrees. Yep.
so is that mean at my 30 years old is something, do you
Great
see
question.
what a,
So
yeah, yeah,
when you
yeah.
turn when you turn 30 years old, you were 29 degrees progressed in Cancer, your
That was
sun.
2013. Okay. That was
That was
2013. Now we are,
2013.
that's why you were
Oh,
talking about that. And I was like, wait a minute, because
okay.
30 years old, that 30 was such an initiation that now I look back, I know it was a such beautiful initiation because
Yeah.
there's so many things that happened in that 12 months, literally in that 12 months. Graduation, I got baptized, but not
Wow.
baptized as Christian, but baptized. I really feel there's something outside of me, bigger than me. I for the first time, I start believing. Okay. Then I
And
got,
Cancer is the waters of baptism too. So to do that at the it's the
yeah.
with the Holy Spirit. So that's wild.
Yeah, I
That's
did
very
that at end of February, so literally 4 months before my birthday. Then I moved
okay.
back to China end of March. Then I got pregnant mid of May, got back to United States that year, October. And in the 2014 January, I had my baby born, but I'm still within 30 years because that's the 2013 is the year I turned to 30. So before I turned to 31, I finished everything that like in that 12 months of period of time. I'm like, I had
What a
no idea
phenomenon.
it was something. That's why I was like, when you say 29, every year is 1 degree. So which means by 30, it start again. So where am I right now? I'm like 13 degrees of sun right now. No, yeah,
Oh,
12.
great question. Yeah, so yeah, 12 you're probably 12 degrees Leo sun. And just to clarify on that,
Yeah,
it's the actual date of the chart. So basically when you were the day after you were born,
yeah.
that's what your chart became the year after you were born. So you can literally go 30 plus 12 days or however long days since you were born, and that's your new chart. And of course, since every day the sun moves a degree, every year the progressed sun will move a degree. And then that will let you know where the other planets have progressed relative to where it was that day.
Relative right now.
And
Okay.
it's and the
Yeah.
progress chart is more accurate than the natal chart. It gives you real time what's happening. The natal chart is still very accurate. The progress just gives you an extended range of from when you were born to what's happening now, which is mind blowing.
Yeah, it's already
Beautiful.
blew my mind. I'm like, I lost all my questions. So, do you take personal client? Because before we tap into
Absolutely.
collective reading, let's just go through those, those questions first.
Social.
Do you take one-on-one clients for these days?
Absolutely. I have a 70% off sale until the end of Gemini season for all my reports. I do natal chart readings, progress chart readings, synastry readings. If you want to look at compatibility, we could look at the eclipse, my transit forecast. We can look at what's happening in the sky right now, how that'll affect you for the next 6 months to a year. And then if you don't want to speak one-on-one, I do have recorded reports
Mm,
where I'll just record the report and email it to you when I'm done. And I
great.
have a new app, a new application. So I'd love to share that.
Great, great, great.
Maybe
Because I feel like you are, of course, every day, not every day I have those conversations with people, but being doing podcasts in the last couple of years, right? You read it,
yeah.
you connecting with so many people, but I feel like you give me this aha moment and help me to understand myself better because I always know there's something about my birthday. I just, that the feeling versus logically, like when you Gemini, you like study those data. Like it's kind of so fulfilling to even
Mhm.
oh, now I understand it. Those they are showing me all the numbers. I understand. Now I'm like, okay, I still have a lot of questions, but great. So,
Coming together.
yeah, and I do want to have a compatibility because, somebody I'm seeing dating for a couple of years, com- he also has okay, Scorpio and a Cancer in the Sun Moon rising, but his rising is Capricorn. So he's Scorpio
Oh, you
Sun.
got all these risings. Okay.
So he has Scorpio Sun, Cancer Moon, and the Capricorn rising. So I
That
have Scorpio Moon
that man is
and
your
Cancer rising.
soulmate. Yeah, he's your soulmate. Like, and the reason, because so people throw the soulmate label around, but there's certain aspects in the chart that define and indicate significant connections. And I'm mind blown that you just told me that. So, one thing I always look at is the sun conjunct the moon. So his sun is on your moon. That's a
Yeah.
classic soul connection, platonically, romantically. He is your light. It works the other way around too. Normally, for the man. Sorry for the
No, I
honking in the back.
no, I don't even
For
hear
the
it because our mic probably doesn't pick up anything.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
But for the man, the moon is his mother and his wife. So when the woman's sun is on his moon, that's a good aspect. It's more
Hmm.
common to see because the sun is masculine, women usually intuitively gravitate towards a man whose Jupiter or sun, is on their sun or moon. But for what
Mm.
also is indicative uh his moon in Cancer connects with your rising in Cancer, so your personality feels like who he feels his wife is. That's a very significant, like it's very common in married people's charts to see moon in the first house. Because it like when I meet Capricorn rising woman, my Capricorn moon, they feel like they could be my wife, or they feel like it's very it aligns with that, and then you
Yeah.
both have opposite risings of partnership. Like that's very significant. So that's
Yeah.
what's really
So I
yeah.
mean, if you guys are like watching, we have a big things to unpack. But just for here, I feel like I'm not trying to sell him. I know he has a lot of clients, but I'm just like, so excited because as Gemini, like we get super excited at the moment. We are living in the present moment. It's literally
Yeah,
amazing. Because like you will go have somebody put a birthday put together, they will tell you a bunch of whatever crazy stuff. But like I love when people say, okay, this sound have some scientific, right? Because we are all, I'm
right.
very in flow of certain thing feeling. But also sometimes I like grab data to also support my internal feeling. Like Gemini with my Cancer heart, like, okay, that makes
Um,
sense. They all coming together. So
no.
if you guys interested, definitely check out. I will put his link there. Okay.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's a problem with most fields like astrology. that don't have accreditation. You don't need to pass a bar exam to become an astrologer. So it's very easy to say Barnum statements, good feeling, vague things
Mm-hmm.
that sound right, but thankfully, like you mentioned, like being able to back it by, okay, this is what's mathematically happening, to support this idea, and then you can see it yourself.
Yeah.
Like you said, it satisfies our want for some data, for some loss, which is
Yeah,
cool.
because in this world, I feel like, also in my chart as well, maybe I'm in this transition, from 29, 30 to 0 to 1. I feel like I'm always see life, I want to be able to use both sides, not just lean into one side or other side. It didn't work because I went to both, like super left, super right, and then just realized that neither of them correct and neither of them wrong. But I try to be in the middle, grab left, grab right, so can cook something make sense to both end. So I'm not gonna be extreme, whatever, right? So talk about extreme things. Okay,
Okay.
do you want to share your screen to talk about those things about, like, what happened, like, on the astrology? Because maybe we need to back up a little bit from January, right? Like, because
Absolutely. Absolutely.
also United States, the position is huge, heavily. This is just like watch a drama, like something
Mhm.
that you don't know where it's gonna go, and it's also related to a lot of siblings in this family. Because I treat Earth as a bigger home, right? Because this
Yeah.
household itself is changing, but each family member is also shifting. Yeah. Is that you clicking or me clicking?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that was me.
Okay,
We
here we
so
go.
yeah, I like how I think the most fun part of this right now will be recapping what has happened previously,
Mm-hmm.
because the last 5 years in and of itself have been nothing but historic, and we're gonna look back on that in another by the in the rest of the decade. We're gonna look at the 2020s with more insight on what really happened. And
Yes.
props to everyone who's still alive and has gone through this, because you are a part of history. You are a part of this revolutionary time. So what we're gonna use to really gauge this is Pluto and Saturn. Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus transit and orbit the Earth past Saturn. So we call them trans-Saturnian. As such, they're transpersonal. These are the three planets that you cannot see visibly without a telescope.
Mm-hmm.
So the first planets up until Saturn, which are visible, represent in our society, actual tangible qualities of society, beauty industries through Venus, cars, athletics through Mars. Saturn is going to represent our economy, the systems, and the rules. And that's what makes Saturn the border and the edge. Every government has a system, and that's why when tracking Saturn cycles, it's very easy to see changes in systematics throughout governing authorities. But now, when we look at Saturnian cycles in relation to these outer planets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Pluto, for example, which isn't considered a planet, but is the slowest moving orbiting. In fact, it takes 248 years to return to its sign, right? The last time Pluto was in Aquarius like this, America had recently signed its Declaration of Independence when it was at the end of Capricorn. So for it to be back is one thing. Another thing, of course, is that what's relevant, like, but when we talk about what's about to happen, Uranus is going to go into Gemini and Neptune and Saturn are in Aries. The very last time Neptune had just touched Aries around the 1800s, America had its Civil War and Uranus
Mm-hmm.
was in Gemini. The last time Uranus was in Gemini, after the Great Depression, we had World War II. So it's something to think about with the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, Israel and Palestine, the internal conflicts happening with ICE and immigration, all of these conflicts in Africa and in Australia, Europe, they're preparing for the next 30-year cycle that's going to shape the geopolitics of the world ahead. And this is where we need to take into account what generation of children are coming of age during this period, with the Pluto Sagittarians, the Zoomers, the Gen Alpha, the Gen Betas who are just being born. And then of course you have the Pluto Virgos born in the 60s, the Pluto Libras born in the 70s and the 80s, the Pluto Scorpios born in the 90s, and then Pluto Sag born in the late 90s, 2000s, that, are not only coming of age in the late 90s part, but, anyone born before like 1990 has already come of age, has already had their Saturn return. You guys are in more of a position to take the lead that your parents and their parents had before.
What is
And
Saturn
it's
return? Can you clarify? I heard that so many times. Why is that thing so important? Is that when I was 29, we talk about 29 degrees? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. So basically, the degree your Saturn is in, basically, when Saturn was at the end of Libra, and when you were born, your Saturn took an entire evolution because it takes 28 to 30 years to come back around. So, what does Saturn return represent? Saturn in astrology is authority. Wherever Saturn is in your chart is where you will eventually become an authority figure. It is your work ethic. So, the way I like to think of it is before a police officer or any officer of the law or authority of the law can pull you over or do anything, they have a badge. They have
Mm,
an authoritative, construct that represents from a higher presiding authority the authority to do that, right? So basically, when you were born, right, you were just a baby, but you came into this world with potency, in this case, Saturn and Libra, karmic authority. So the analogy for this is obviously the first 14, 17, 20 years of your life, you're still growing up, you're gaining necessary experiences. This is that system of your own karma, the way you respond to experiences, racking up whether you align with integrity or you fight against that integrity. When Saturn comes back around, it's like an audit. It's like,
mm,
okay, now you have the authority to drive the car that you were a baby, you couldn't drive, but it was your car. Now your spirit team or this older part of your consciousness is giving you the keys so you can drive the car. That's why when you turn 38, 30, it's like your life really starts there. You're really stepping into adulthood. Even though, 21 is the official age of like adulthood and consent, 28 to 30 is where you've really been around the block. You've gained the first surface level of experiences. People who have horrible Saturn returns did not align with their integrity the
mm.
first 30 years. So that karma catches up to them. They either have to go to prison or they are unsuccessful because they didn't break through or whatnot, versus people who put in the work and actually now with this Saturn return establish greater stability, greater authority. So that Saturn return is going to represent now at this stage, once you become 28, you now go through another 30-year cycle up until 56, where
Mm,
now you step into your second return, which is now you've gained the power at 30. Now you're fulfilling your karma and destiny throughout the next 30 years. And then some people go a third round, which is the magnum opus round, for people who reach to like 90 or whatnot.
mhm.
But yeah, it's one of the most important cycles, and it's something we can even see in countries. Something that's
Yeah.
very important. America was born with its sun in Cancer, so
Mm,
Jupiter in Cancer is getting ready to level up this country, or at least the establishment of it as a corporation. So, a lot to keep in mind. But when we look at the Saturn cycle, we want to look at 1997, because 1997 and 1996, around when like people like me were born, was the last time Saturn started this cycle.
mm,
One thing that's very significant about Saturn cycles is it really does speak of a generational cycle. For example, when we were born, those of us in the 90s, and Saturn was last in Aries, the programs that came out when we were children, now that Saturn is coming back into Aries, great example, Pokemon. Pokemon came out around this time. Now that Saturn has gone all the way around the block, Pokemon is a global entity. Everyone's playing the games. In the show, the main character has finally finished his story. And I like that timing because that represents an entire generation of children
Yes.
who grew up on programs like this. And now it shapes what they create, it shapes what they do. And Pokemon is just one example. If we go back even further, right? The generational cycle before that was the 60s. So 68 was the last time Saturn was in Aries, coming out
Mm,
into 66, 67. You could literally infinitely loop back every 30 years. And that's what's going to really speak of these new cycles. So, what makes this cycle the new
yes.
world order, right? What makes this Saturn cycle bringing in the new world? And that's where we have to bring in these outer planets because Saturn is going to be relative to the system, these 30-year cycles, but Neptune, Uranus, Pluto that take 85, 165, 248 years are going to be more outer markers that will represent on a much broader generational scale, facets that we dealt with. For example, Neptune hasn't been here since the 1800s, revisiting the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln and in a sense mirroring certain sentiments and that's why these cycles are important because everything that's happened since the foundation of this country, since the 1800s, is a direct consequence of what's happening right now. The riots that are happening in LA aren't necessarily as simple as immigrants that are coming into this country. It heavily stems from the Mexican American War back around like the expansion of America. And you have a lot of Mexican people who will still feel like, oh, we lived in this land first, right?
Hmm.
Events from back then are still very much so affecting what we see here, affecting what we see in Israel and Gaza and whatnot. So it's just so fun to study these cycles. And now, in order to gain a really good context of how to make sense of this, of what's happening now, why it's so iconic, it's really good to go back to 2020. March 21st, 2020, something very peculiar happened. And I like to call it the beginning of the end of the world. We know what happened 2020
Hmm.
and 2021, but this also coincided relative to the completion of those previous cycles. So we had the four horsemen of the apocalypse activate their cycle at the beginning of the end. Let's make sense of that.
Yeah.
Saturn in the tarot has its representation of the world, the physical representation of the material totality of the universe. Everything that is physical that constitutes the universe is what's represented symbolically here by Saturn. So it rules Capricorn, the ruler of great power, collective power. This is why now when we break up the zodiac, as all of them are one consciousness, but of course we compartmentalize and break things down into components. So we have the first intro, Aries to Gemini represents the beginning of a story. We're introducing the characters, the quality of the characters, and the initial conflict. Then we have the next part of the story, summer, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. This begins to integrate the story. It begins to tie together the facets we've described and activated. We explore more of these conflicts and it starts to develop the habitual quality of what we've activated. Then we have fall, breakthrough. This is where we reach the climax of the story. So we start to attack the conflict head on, we reach difficulty, and then we ascend in Sagittarius to the pinnacle. We beat the final boss. We finally, against all odds, make it to the light. This is
Hmm.
called breakthrough. It's harvest. This is where what we activated at the beginning of the story, we've now taken action to fulfill. And then the last part, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, is the conclusion of the story. And what I'm going to prove with case studies and more look into history is that every time we have prominent placements in these last three signs, you will see collectively cycles ending. You will see, because unlike Aries, Taurus, and Gemini that are individual, something to keep in mind, because now Neptune and Saturn are in Aries, Uranus is in Gemini. The focus is going to be more on individual rights, individual stateship, what individual states want to identify with. Before in 2020, we were closing out global concerns. A lot of more people were concerned with globalism and the effect of elites on our own individual rights, as we've seen with them unjustified lockdowns and the response with these experimental, I won't say the word, but with that being said, we have the four horsemen of the apocalypse here. Saturn representing death as it's the reaper,
Hmm.
Pluto representing pestilence, Mars representing war, the god of war, and Jupiter is a point of fortune and it's a point of abundance, but it's in its fall in Capricorn. So that's going to represent famine. Two things I want to really establish before we go deeper is that we can actually look in history. One, every time Jupiter left Sagittarius and entered its fall in Capricorn, predictably, there was a crash in the market. It peaked 2019, crashed 2020. It peaked 2007, crashed 2008,
Yeah.
right? Furthermore, every time we see Pluto and Jupiter connected, all right, we actually see the presence of a pandemic. So if we actually look up H1N1, right?
Hmm.
H1N1 pandemic happened. If we're looking at the Spanish flu, okay, that was the swine flu. I'm trying to look at the one that happened earlier. So let's do Spanish flu of 1918, 1918, 1990 Spanish influenza pandemic, right?
Hmm.
If we go back to now 1918, what we're going to see, would you look at that? We have
There we
Ju
go.
in 1919, we have
Mhm.
Jupiter, Pluto. And then if we actually move a little forward here, later, by the time we get to, where's Jupiter? There we go. So by the time we get to now, yeah, 1956, but I do want to say like, oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't in 1960s. So if we go to like 1969, 1968, that was the H3N2 pandemic, basically, the Hong Kong flu.
Mm.
So it's interesting to see these patterns. Jupiter and Pluto were together with that pandemic, this pandemic, and then, of course, by 2020, it was in Capricorn of organization, planning, and structure. This is what led people to believe, who knows, maybe it might have been kind of planned or regardless of if it was or not, though, we do see that correlation. So I just wanted to show you as
Yeah.
far as that apocalypse cycle, it's one of the most important dates that I think are just so overlooked. And shout out to, I don't know exactly who brought it to my attention, because when I had first seen this before and it was brought to me, I scoffed at it. I was like, no. Then I
Mm.
actually looked at it and I was like, no, this is the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So we do have this conjunction cycle, right? Since 2020, every 2 years, Mars goes into the it starts a new Saturn a cycle with Saturn. So March 21st, this is the beginning of the end. The reason why I say the beginning of the end, because we know the first three is the beginning, next three is integration, next three is breakthrough, and the last three is the end.
So
The
12,
end.
so 12 years cycle, right?
Oh, great question. So, well, 12-year cycle with Jupiter, but this is just speaking of transits in general.
Okay.
So any transits, whether 30-year cycle, 248-year cycle. So basically, Capricorn is the beginning of this end block.
Yeah.
So, of course, every season has 3 mini months in it, right? So we began to finish 2020, right? 2 years later, of course, and this is so beautiful. 2020, we had the pandemic. By the time the god of war, Mars, came back and signed a new contract with Saturn, Ukraine and Russia. And then 2 years later, when Saturn came back around with Pisces, we had more of Gaza and Israel. A conflict that didn't start there. Like neither of those two conflicts started with that, but it's interesting to see the alignment here. And now, why 2024 is significant is now with Saturn at the end of Pisces and Neptune, this is where we began to facilitate the end of the world, all right, as we know it. So the reason why that's significant, we know that Saturn represents the world and order, and Aries is a new cycle. So Saturn in Aries is the new world order. And because we have Pluto finishing its cycle out in Aquarius, and Uranus and Neptune have already begun its new cycle, that's a way we can measure that we're not only bringing in completely new themes we'll never see, like with AI and technology. AI wasn't relevant until Pluto went into Aquarius, even though it's been in works for years. Cryptocurrency wasn't relevant until this innovation of Uranus of securities in Taurus actually came through. That's when it became popular. So that's what makes this very exciting because now we've kind of recapped where we came from. We know that since 2020, we were concluding 30-year cycles with Saturn, 248-year cycles with Pluto, 185-year cycles with Neptune since the 1800s. So all of these things that have been initiated since the 1700s, the 1800s, all through the 1900s, not only are they ending, we see that reflected in our sociocultural dynamics of a new generation that doesn't want to really carry forth what, just to give you an idea of why the people born in the 50s and the 60s didn't mind carrying stuff forward. And even back with them, any generation is going to rebel against whatever
Yeah.
current structure. But to see now at a higher collective level, right?
Hmm.
All of this kind of come through. One other thing to keep in mind, when the 90s came around and Uranus and Neptune started to transit the last three signs of collective globalism, that was when now technology reached a point to where everyone around the world can connect, innovating business and all other sorts of things because it finally reached collectively. Before that time, people couldn't really communicate with each other like that and express forward. Now, this isn't the first time these planets have been back there. So it in of itself doesn't mean it automatically means that, but it is always coincided with revolutions, the industrial revolution, the technological revolution. So that's something to speak of where we're coming from. Where we are now is now that Saturn is beginning its new 30-year cycle. Now that Neptune in Aries is beginning its new 185 or 65-year cycle, Jupiter is getting ready to square, of course, Saturn. And the entrance of Jupiter into Cancer represents a brand new wave that's going to impact everyone socially in preparation to create a brand new society.
Which is today.
Well, Jupiter has entered Cancer today. So the
Yeah.
way to look at that is whenever you see a tsunami, you
Hmm.
notice that the tide recedes. And like if you're at the beach, the where the water usually is has receded
Yes.
back because it's about to splash even crazier. So what people might have been realizing, especially since 2020 or 2023, is the money they used to be making is probably low. I think the economies have taken a great hit. Some people are thriving successfully, but some people are struggling to do what used to work for them. And that was Saturn and Pisces testing very vigorously. A lot of people preach what they preach. Do they practice what they preach? Everyone's integrity of their belief systems were tested. And this is what exposed who were the frauds, who just kind of adopt what's popular versus who is disciplined in their craft and field. Because those people who pass that test, they're going to be the authority figures over this next 30-year cycle, which
Mm.
over the next 30 years, technology is going to replace 99% of jobs. I'm throwing that percentage out arbitrarily, but I mean a lot of a lot of vocations are going to be replaced with technology. A lot of society is going to shift. Nothing that, of course, isn't new to any other time in history. Change is a constant, but the way with which we're going to be in the thick of the middle of this right now, experiencing and being a part of this is once again not only historic, but coinciding with the last time this globe suffered global conflicts. With Neptune in Aries and with Uranus in Gemini, that emboldens people to say the most radical things on platforms like X, where people are the media now, and we get to see the positives and the negatives of people being able to just say whatever they want, which
Yeah.
agitate people and it can make sense as to why these conflicts really occur. So, yeah, I would say as of now, we're experiencing since April the tide that's been receding, the calm before the
Mm.
storm. And this calm period is already chaotic. So it lets you know how intense and ridiculous everything is about to be moving forward. Not to say there won't be low points, but as you can see, Jupiter is in Cancer, it's squaring Saturn. So after about a week from now, as we end Gemini season, and then we appropriately come onto this conjunction, boom, the new moon that we have is going to square Neptune and Saturn. This is June 25th, and that's going to really mark throughout the rest of this month very volatile, powerful shifts. Saturn, that is having to establish this new cycle of authority and integrity relative to what is the face of every nation. Everything you believed you can be through Saturn and Pisces, how are you actually establishing this? While Neptune is entirely reimagining who everyone is. And that's why it's very important to study that 1800 period, like with the Dred Scott decision and other such factors that really shaped the way of how, certain people weren't even considered fully human. There were still
Mm.
issues with slavery. And I don't even mean in an American context. I mean, like all over the world, certain things that, of course, people would be appalled with now that was normal back then, which really those changes that begun then led to pave way for it to be here now. Now, identity issues are going to really be more abstractified around what people's pronouns are, whether they can change their gender, how we kind of, what are the ethics of connecting with robot-like beings and other such quote unquote complex socio-cultural factors. But it's so important to see because at 1 and 2 degrees, it's barely just starting. At 3 degrees Aquarius, we're barely just beginning over the next 20 years to awaken humanity. So 2024 to 2044, Pluto is going through Aquarius. That's going to every year intensify how much more people are awakening supernatural abilities and quality,
Mm.
and how progressively humanity awakens further. Of course, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, America had its revolution, France had its revolution, Russia had its revolution, Haiti has its revolution. So this is what's going to inspire the next wave of revolutions moving forward. And Jupiter is that square on the home front that challenges this authority. It's this expansion of emotions as a response to this hardcore switchback, out of the feminine Pisces, out of the grounded Capricorn, into very radical revolutionary Aquarius and hyper masculine Aries. So the Jupiter square is a necessary buffer where Jupiter right now is going to expand how we feel, but Saturn is going to be the constriction to hold that expansion in place. Whereas Jupiter's expansion is going to challenge that restriction so that we're
Mm.
not too restricted. And both of these are in individual signs, giving it, of course, a more personal quality. Given that squares represent outside influences as well, this is what we're seeing with these protests, these demonstrations, these clashings with authority. But if you think about it, the way tectonic plates shift, the way, things are formed, they require things to kind of conflict. And through that, we see where it kind of stands out. And it's also important to know that everything we're experiencing at these initial degrees is still only barely just getting started
Yeah,
and
yeah.
gives us an
Okay.
of
I
where
mean,
we're.
yeah. I mean, I kind of want to kind of pause here a little bit because that's a lot to digest for people. Because you are speaking a foreign language I barely understand. I understand a little bit, because you have to understand, those different sign mean different thing. We're not even talk about degree, but I think that's why I'm very like I need to see it so I understand. So are you saying, okay, we literally barely started?
Yes, yes, and
But
that's a great.
however, we are ending a lot of. Can I also say that we are kind of ending. I don't want to say that ending, but because a lot of things, because in the last 2 3 years, right? Because it already started, but with the new world order, let's just put new order, barely started. So is that gonna intensify those world, or is gonna be
Absolutely.
okay? So you answer
And
my
and
question.
for example, like the tariffs that the president put is unprecedented, where it's not like it's never happened before, but these a lot of things are being established that will set up as more important later. And that's where, like, when studying World War One didn't just start because the Archduke of Ferdinand was shot. There was already mounting tensions between these countries before
Mm,
that made them ready for war. Certain countries already didn't like each other. They just needed that, like, trigger.
yes.
And that represents the past 10 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, where, mounting tensions between Russia and Ukraine, between Gaza and Israel. You have more countries that don't support what Israel is doing. You have countries that do support what they're doing. These things are all going to eventually lead into resolution or great conflict.
So
And
how
that's
long from the charts gonna be last for that? Can you see that, or is there like because depends on the Jupiter or what is another one?
well,
Neptune, right?
Well, we could see down to the date when these cycles will play out.
Yeah,
What happens during these cycles, we can say is anyone's guess. We can make educated guesses, but we do know that what's significant about this, if we go back, remember the 2020 date I showed you,
yeah,
where we did have all the planets in Capricorn.
yes.
So
Full.
since Jupiter conjuncted Saturn at the end of Cap and in Aquarius, this is the first time that it's finally making a 90-degree angle. So the new Saturn Jupiter cycle we activated 2020, 2021, that we planted those seeds, they're finally breaking through the ground in water. Okay. We're coming into how collect individually we all feel about this new era and cycle. We're actively defining it. And while we're going through it, it's not going to feel like it. We're going to be aware of it in the moment, but it's very interesting to see. And that's where, of course, if you can see, Jupiter is making a 93-degree angle at 3 degrees. At 1 degrees Jupiter and 1 degree Saturn, that's exactly 90 degrees. 90 degrees now means that since 2020, we've activated everything that's going to be a part of this new cycle. And now we're getting ready to tie it together. And that's where the difficulty and challenge comes because we have
Mm.
clashes, right? We have different, so many different diaspora or so many different, like, groups of people. And that collective test we were all supposed to really kind of establish, we're going to start to see the results of, that's for sure. But that's the square alone, very significant. And of course, Pluto and Aquarius, by 2044, it'd be interesting to see what the world looks like because now
That's
from
what I'm going to ask. I was like, okay, now that's why I'm laughing. I was like, okay, now I understand why you say it's barely started. We literally have another
yeah.
like 15 years,
Oh yeah.
right? That
In
to
15 years,
2044.
right? So, okay, yeah, 24. Yeah, in 15 years, Saturn's gonna be like around, let's actually look at it. It's gonna be like around Leo. I don't even think it's gonna be in Libra. Okay, it's gonna be in
Ooh, look at that. I don't know what that means, but look at that. Look at that. Look at that chart. Look at that square. Like I don't even know how to say that, but it's look at.
The
pretty.
rectangle.
Yeah, look at that. It's a square.
That is a square. It is a square. That's very. So by the time Saturn is in Scorpio at the last social sign, why this is important now? Let's add another layer to this.
Yeah.
Everyone who was born in 67 is coming into their next Saturn return. Everyone who was born in 97, they're coming into their very first Saturn return. They're becoming 30. A lot more children are entering the workforce because they're adults now. They're going to be able to vote. We're going to start to see transitions of who's holding authority and power. A lot of the people who are doing it now, by then, they will have passed. You know what I mean? So these are going to be major shifts that we feel and tap into. Everything we're establishing now throughout the end of the decade, because by 2033, Saturn will be in Cancer with Uranus. By the time it's in Scorpio, we will have finished integrating into society. So it's like if we start creating the technology for flying cars and for smart technology that talks to you, by 2044, it's fully integrated. Children are
Mm,
being born knowing nothing but flying cars their whole life, just hypothetically, let's just say. And this is a cycle that happens all the time. If we go from, of course, the 67 where Aries was last, moving forward to the 80s when Saturn was back into Scorpio, we can see from the 80s to the 60s a lot of what was initiated during that civil rights era and the end of the 60s and the 70s, boom, transformed through the 80s to bring us what we experienced in the 90s. We did it all over again. So,
mm,
in studying these cycles, this is where all the magic is. It's where you really find the answer. You start to be able to predict to the T what may happen. It's why I knew before Russia declared war on Ukraine that there was going to be some kind of conflict. I didn't know it was going to be with Russia and Ukraine, but I saw the nodes, the North nodes, and what was aspecting it, and it helps you be able to, in understanding other cycles, it speaks to you and you
mm.
get to see it beyond what's being presented to you on the surface. And that, that's why I love doing this, and I want to teach people this language because once you speak it, that's your own coded conversation between you and the universe. Nobody can take that from you. Nobody can say you need to worship this God or you need to follow
Yeah.
this authority. That's between you and who created you, who you were born as, and it's really riveting. It's very exciting.
Well, when you are, I mean, I will be your student when you start teaching because I always learn the best. Like a lot of things that I do in the world, like I feel like I found the best teacher that I in that area to teach me or help me remember those, skills that I have. So I think
Mhm.
you will, when you open, let me know. I will sign up to. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I have no silly question, but I have a question that in my mind when you're talking about. So you at beginning you said you can do the compatibility with people, right? But
Yep.
you can do that with country, right? Let's say if you want to know what's the relationship later with, let's say, China with US, can you just put their
Absolutely.
dates
Uh,
in to see where their relation gonna evolve in the next couple of years? Does that make sense?
I was skeptical about it before because I didn't think it was as simple as just pulling up a fictional or a arbitrary date that some people just decided when a country is going to be established. But I was so wrong. You
Mm,
you can run what people do is more astrocartography, so they'll see where your placements land on certain countries. But what you said is also something that's not done as much, but it's still very effective. So you can take a country's chart and you can place it with your chart and see how that actually affects you or see how you affect it, kind of analyze and measure what you experience and what you kind of break through. You can also do it with crypto. Some people do it with the establishment of when certain cryptos or
mm.
securities were born, when certain corporations were born. I initially felt like it'll only apply to living, breathing people, but anything that's been officially established, even as a pendulum, does count. And it,
That
it
makes
colors the
sense.
subjective, yeah. It colors the subjective part of it, but you can glean objective insights from it too. So it's definitely
Okay.
something I'll
So
look
next
into.
question. Like if so, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but I'm just generally curious about the position for United States in next, because we are on the bigger wheel, right? We have a bigger world wheel going on, and each of us are like country wise. But individual, we are right with the wave with the country, right? And now I born in China, but I'm not in United States. So I ride the wave. I probably can feel both, but I probably ride a wave a lot of things in United States because it's gonna affect my life even way more serious than even though I'm Chinese, right? I mean,
Right.
now I
Right.
cannot really leave the country because now, as you can see, not say I can't, but you everybody have a risk of re-entering. Things get very
Yeah,
scary right now.
that's
So,
true.
like, but what's the US, because we're not going to put China or Russia or whoever, but US, you probably already did that. What is that trajectory in next couple years? Like, are we what's the worst thing could happen? Let's talk about that,
That's a good
if that
question.
makes sense.
So I want to do on my channel um a birthday chart for the United States. And as you can see, July 4th, this is the Declaration of Independence. This is where America gained its independence. But
Yeah.
if we go back here, uh here is the June 21st, uh 1788. Um These these data are based on the ratification of the United States Constitution. Most astrologers use
Mm,
July 4th to calculate the natal chart of the USA. The problem is, factually speaking, there was no USA in 1776. There was only a collection of rebellious British colonies under rule. So this is I'm going to actually look into this. So this is kind of speaking of, at this point, this was where the Constitution was actually ratified. And what's interesting is, ironically, both dates, 1788 and 1776, feature America with a Cancer sun and an Aquarius moon, both dates here, which I
mm,
don't know if that was on purpose or not. The 1776 date is the Sag rising, and this date is the Libra rising. So I like to use both of them personally because the Declaration of Independence, even though it technically wasn't ratified, it still is a launching point that led to it.
yeah.
But I like this date much better because look, Jupiter is in Cancer. So America is getting ready to go through into its own Jupiter return, which is going to make for perhaps some of the biggest transfers of liquidity. I think this is a period where the economy, whether, there's talks of a potential recession, right? Which
Hmm.
would really mirror the last time Uranus was in Taurus. But I have the hopes and do believe that America and the rest of the world may produce, the new set of millionaires and billionaires. I think there's going to be major inflation, but I think there's going to be major, liquidity that ends up, making a lot more people wealthy. If that comes through a major recession and debt first, we'll see. But just seeing that Jupiter is within degrees of America's sun and its own Jupiter based on this 1788 date, and Pluto is awakening its moon, it's inspiring not only revolution within America, but it's getting ready to fulfill its evolution cycle since 2017, ironically, the year after Trump was elected. So, it definitely speaks towards, I would say, direct evolution. America is leveling up. Now, what's also interesting is, in terms of America, we have Saturn and Aries, and the revolutionary nature of this country is very significant because the way America was established is not what America is now. And you have people that are still arguing over what is the face of America. What is America supposed to be? You have people who believe America is white and Christian, and we need to kick out other people who don't look like them, right?
Yeah.
uh outside of people who are of course are naturalized, and these are not everyone thinks this, but it's a proponent voice. You have people who want people who are citizens to remain that. You have people who want to really quash against this mass immigration, because one thing in the conversation is, I know if I went to Nigeria, where I'm from, I'm not going to see an American flag being flown. You won't see an American flag being flown in China, right? You're going to see the Chinese flag, but so many foreign flags are flown in this country. So America, for the longest time, has had an identity crisis. It has had an
Yes.
identity issue. And you have so many immigrants that have naturalized themselves in here, who from all around the world, who have transformed what it means to be an American. And I think that's the major basis of what we can see in this Cancer to Aries square, where you have people who romanticize a previous version of America that they want to make great again, and then you have people who are pushing for a more progressive element of America that takes it away from what it was established as. I'm not going to say that either is right or wrong, but these are the forces in conflict, and they're going to create waves relative to
Yes.
what side people go in towards. And I think it's exciting personally. It's like the most exciting season of America I've ever watched. And I'm very interested to see, what twists come as a part of it.
I mean, when you say the waves, actually in my mind, I actually saw the waves because I mean, the one thing I can guarantee is the world is never gonna be the same again. Because
Ever.
just because the new energy coming versus the old this identity, I think a new identity with old identity, even though at the end of the day we combine both of them, they're still not gonna be the same old or same new. They has to be a hybrid of certain things, right? Because that's the like natural. If you are, let's say, that's why the babies like my babies, they are hybrid, not hybrid. They're mixed baby, right? So I think that whatever coming out 2044 will be something hybrid. I don't know the percentage wise, like you maybe 70-30, 80-20. I do not know. But completely take all the things away. I don't, I just, this is not from anything about astrology. It's just from the natural, how things
Right.
involve in the nature is like, we are reintegrating, like even the identity, we're talking about identity. 2020 was my identity. Now 2020 was what 2020 is the thing when it's tipping point. But like 2016, 17, 18, a lot of people, that's why a lot of people 2020 is so important to many of people, is they are like, well, yeah, the 2020 this thing happened to me. I'm like, whoa. So but things didn't just happen 2020, is already being cooking making for a couple of
Yeah.
years. They say from 2013, 2014, I already say 2015, 16, and the 2017, 18 reached to the darkness. And then when the pandemic hit, it's just okay, I don't have to hold it any longer, right?
Yeah.
Then we come out to rebuild, like, what is my new identity? But when you pick up a new identity, you went on a hero's journey again. So when you talk about the 12 months, because hero's journey is 12 step. So that's my make sense of, okay, those first three steps will be really hard because you literally are
Yeah.
battering with the old, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had chills when you said that, because those three steps, and I'm glad you said it's a 12-step journey. It's like we're experiencing this on multiple fronts. So when it comes to this world order, we're on the first part of that step.
Yep.
So 2025 to 2027 is going to really initiate new conflicts, new alliances, right? We're seeing countries connect that probably didn't even like each other like that before, and we're seeing countries start to perhaps disconnect like they didn't before. So 2027 is going to introduce that. 2027 to about 2029, give or take, is going to be that second step karmically on a world stage. And then 2029 to like 2032, 2033 is that third Gemini step. So that's like the next 7 years is for Saturn. Now for Jupiter, we already finished the first three steps. 2023, 2024. or late 2022, late
Mm,
2023,
makes
and late
sense.
2024. Now it's getting ready to go into Cancer. So, as far as us evolving into our next cycle, into our next beings, we've activated the first three steps of this journey.
Yes.
And now that we're integrating it, karma is getting now the world is catching up, and we're getting ready to have to take how we've evolved with these new limits on our freedoms because individual rights are the name of the game moving forward. Like we know what has been mandated on us and what we were forced to do, sometimes against our will. Now, this is when restrictions are put on you individually. How are you going to fight on that? How are you going to maintain these rights? And that's going to be huge for every.
Question. So even though I don't understand astrology, but I think I may connect dots. So for different zone is for the different sign, right? Like for myself, I feel like my first 40 years was deeply in the darkness. Like it's the first stage because I'm Cancer Gemini, right? Like you see on the charts, I'm just literally staring at the Cancer there, and I'm in 29 degrees of Gemini.
Yeah.
So that's why but what you said it because the Jupiter is already in Cancer, right? By we are talking about today, Jupiter is entering Cancer, whatever, however
Yep.
thing is that make sense of why let me rephrase the question. So is that mean that if people are who's maybe 24, 25 degrees of Gemini versus to the Cancer, they are on the different, like each person, what I'm saying that each person depends on which sign you're born, that you are going through different stage of this transformation. Because like myself, because I'm already like, when you talk about last 40 years, I'm literally, a lot of planets moving. They are not working with my energy, which is when I say not working with my energy, which means I'm going through the lessons I need to go through.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I already went through a lot of darkness lessons. And
Yes.
which means not doesn't mean I don't have any lesson to learn. I have a lot of lesson too. Because when you go to the second stage, I'm talking about, let's say if 12 steps, right? Now if what it- now I might maybe in that step number 4. So I'm not on step number 1 anymore. But there are a lot of people, they probably just started with step number 1.
You.
So, right? So that's what my feeling is like, this heaviness. I mean, of course the life is still kind of a lot of things that I need to work through, but for whatever reason I feel like maybe my like I can from inside I can testify it is that a lot of things going to open up for people who's born, like who's have the sun in Gemini and a Cancer, but also depends on which year you're born.
Exactly. And that's why I love what you said because, and that's why progressions are so fascinating. Because, like, for example, I was born in 1990. You were born, of course,
83, yeah.
right? Like around the after the late 70s, early 80s, like you said. So you started progressing a whole decade and change before I even started moving forward. So you've already progressed into the light of Leo. You're socially integrating what you've learned
Yeah.
to develop. I'm still in Cancer, getting ready to finish that out. And like it's amazing how like you could reach where certain people were, or people can reach to where you already were when you were born, just by like a few years and whatnot. And I
Mhm.
love how you said that because I do agree too. Like depending on the year you were born, it does signify a lot. And that's where if you were born after 1995, we've already established, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
all the changes happening in the world. So you're coming of age during this period, and they're supposed to create the new world. They're being passed a hot potato of failing economies, conflicting nations, inflated house prices. And this is why they want to burn everything to the ground. You have Luigi Mangione, who's a part of that generation, shot a CEO. You
Hmm.
have a lot more increased violence in this generation. And that's because so many of them are disillusioned. If you were born in the 60s, if you were born in the 70s, you've already passed the torch. So a lot of what us in the 90s are finally coming up to, established, they've already established. And that's what puts those born in the early 80s, coming into the late 80s, late 70s to like early late 80s.
Hmm.
You guys are in the sweet spot. Like you guys are the most important people right now because you're transitioning everything from that old generation to
Yeah,
the new generation, and
I
no one's
feel that.
thanking you for it too. And it's like you guys had to deal with massive disillusionment from seeing all of these things begin to crash, seeing all these promises of go to school, get a good job, and being disillusioned to see that it's a lot more than that. There's so much shifting in the world, and you guys kind of holding that space and breaking through Pluto and Capricorn is directly responsible for how we're going to have to take up after you guys. And that's what makes this very shaky because there's been so much suppression of information and content, and like we said, too much people don't know what's really going on.
No, they
And
don't,
yeah,
actually.
and it's by the time they do, it's going to be too late. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think that's enough to ruin things, but it's going to be a rude awakening for millions of people.
Well, this on the spirituality, we're talking about that like people choose different time to wake up. So, like when I chose 83 to be born, of course, it took me decades to even understand why I choose that specific country, specific time. And I mean, damn, this is a puzzle that you don't even understand how mastery, like, you are the your own master of choosing when you're born, how you were born. Like I didn't understand it because there's a lot of complication when in my childhood and then later you're like, I don't belong to this world, right? But then
Right.
when you're older, you understand that certain people choose want to have tough life at beginning of their life. Certain people they choose, oh, I want to have easy life, but I will have big hit in my 30s, 40s, and I'm gonna rise again. So
Yes.
this is like the dynamic of diversity of the world, and everybody have different role, right? Otherwise,
Yes. Yes.
otherwise it will be a problem. So, and some people wake up a little bit more, some people still sleeping, which is okay,
Yeah.
but like eventually we all move into a general direction. It's just that we are watching different movies at the same time, and then some movies die at a very young, some movies people living 120 years old. You know what I'm saying? So
And
yeah.
I think that was the most important thing you said. It's like, someone pretty much just being asleep and following the trends. That's what they chose. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's a direct consequence of it changed the way I look at that. And you can tell what the progression to when it'll happen. So people either awaken early in the beginning, in the
Yep.
middle of their life, or they just wait at the very end. But at some point, it's gonna happen to everybody.
Exactly. It had or some people they just choose this lifetime. They just want to be play the role of like
Right.
sleeper, because in this way, you have a such just contracts. Because I would not probably wake up if some people they were not deep sleep, they triggered me. I was like, how can you be this deep of certain things of what's wrong with that? And then later you realize, oh, okay, why you not okay with that? So what you want? So then you realize that, oh, you change. Is this person still not change? But that
Right.
the point of this person's sleep is that's exactly he or she needs to be. And I think being sleep is even harder to be awake because they have to be very dense energy to assist the people who are ready to wake up, So that's why later, end of the day, compassion is so important, right? Like compassion for every walk of life. Um,
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
yeah. So I have another question related to this. Like, does that also explain a lot of environmental, let's say earthquake, tsunami? Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know that's connection, but I won't be able to just, you know, unpack on
No,
that.
great question. I'm not entirely sure exactly how, but I 100% believe absolutely. Like even Jupiter going into Cancer, if we hear tsunami warnings, if we find out that there's floods and tsunamis, that's Jupiter in Cancer.
Because
Uh,
water is
because
Jupiter.
yup. I like to
This,
keep it simple like
yeah.
that. It's so much more complex than that. So there's more
Okay.
complex identifiers, but in keeping it simple, Saturn coming out of that 29 degrees Pisces point, 29 degrees Pisces is correlated with massive tsunamis,
Mm,
symbolic. So that'll be interesting to see if it translates really with Jupiter bringing Cancer. When we have placements in Sagittarius, we hear stories about wildfires. You know what I mean? About
Mm.
things burning up. It's
Yeah,
not
fire, right?
right, and it's a fire sign. Exactly. The your transits to Uranus can trigger earthquakes, but of course, I want to be careful with how I say it
Yeah.
because a lot of this symbolically is just the language being expressed. It's not entirely like the planet itself triggers it. That could be seen as like a post ad hoc fallacy where correlation does not equal causation. But there are ELF waves from these planets that hit our Earth, and the Earth is a tuner that takes these waves and it does influence the way, you know what I'm saying, things play
Hmm.
out. So that what you're saying there is a basis towards. I just want to really carve out more detailed
Yes.
how what kind of aligns with that. And because there's so many new combinations, no one transit is exactly the same as a previous date. Even if they're going through the same signs, it's a new perspective. So that's what
Mm.
makes it really exciting. Just more to research. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So, and I think I wrote down certain things because now when I look at the charts, a lot of the new things happen. Is that why technology, communications, that's why the AI or all sorts of things is going to be like now it's just, because we've been prepared that for many years, like you said, it did not jump up. But now I just you have to forgive me because I don't understand the which planet moved to what. But when I look at that first these three steps, I understand why. A lot of the way we communicate is the way, right? We change the shift that become faster and faster. And in the way, the technology is just like, I think I feel like technology wise, I feel like we probably even faster, but everything's timing. Because when you're too fast, we're probably gonna kill ourselves, probably just destroy ourselves. So slow down. It should not be that slow, but also we can't skip too much. You know what I'm saying? Because like you think about like my parents' generation, they don't even know how to use those smartphones. And with
Mhm.
my daughter, oh my goodness, she is like, kind of like editing, da 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 da, 11 years old, that. But
Yeah.
you see that generation with my parents' generation, with my kids' generation, they're so different. So I feel like it's still relatively, we still need to connect on some level. You know what I'm saying? If you're too fast, I feel like we might too early to learn how to run, and actually our bone, our structure is not ready for that. Right?
And no, I love that you said that because your Uranus, once it goes into Gemini, is going to pick up things lightning fast. And it's like from 2018 up until now, all the physical based technology of this innovation has been built. So it's like when it goes into Gemini, our phones are talking to us, our cars are talking to us.
Which will be when? Like Uranus is the what? Every 80, whatever, how many years?
Oh, Uranus, I think takes 85 years, if not 65, but it's going to go through Gemini from 2025 to 2033. And
Okay.
everything's going to be smart. And that's why I love with what you said, because we're going to enter a period where people are getting married to their robots. There's robots like handling menial chores. And just like our parents' thought that we're always on our smartphone and that's weird, we're gonna be the ones like, oh, you guys are just in that virtual reality. All you guys are
I
that.
know.
But
I can always kind of feel that. I was like,
and it's going to be normal for them though. It's going to be like
yeah.
this is all we knew, like get with the times, you know what I mean? So it's interesting that we're alive, like we're experiencing it as it's being released, and that's just going to be like you said, like slow down. We should take our time through this because with Uranus and Gemini, and what you said in the beginning was so important as far as grounding,
Yes.
because the winds are going to blow so radically, and people who
Gemini. Look at.
exactly. And people who don't have that foundation are going to hear this idea, that idea. Like we don't have Virgo, we don't have Seth. So to make sense of this axis of magic, Gemini is the experimenter. And in order to understand the scientific method through astrology, through these mutable signs, Aquarius is the quality of knowledge. If you think science is like a body of knowledge, it's this culmination of it. But the mutable signs of perception show you the different stages of the method to achieve scientific exploration discovery. So Gemini is age like 7 to 9. This is going to represent the discovery, the
Mm.
experimentation phase. Mom, what's that? What's that? Dad,
Yes.
what's that? The curious Gemini. That
Just like me, always.
we ask what Gemini answers the question what. So
Yeah.
this represent, of course, our initial experiment. We're going to test this. We're going to test that. Then Virgo is where we get more mature. Virgo is like 22 to the 30s, where you come out of high school and you start to work a vocation. You become a bit more mature. So Gemini answers what? Virgo answers the question how. So after we experiment and test, we analyze the results. So this is where we start to, test, okay, this is what makes this real. This is what we observed. This is how it happened. And then after analysis, we interpret that analysis. We have to take the facts we analyze in Virgo and we have to see, well, what does it mean? And Sagittarius, a much more mature perspective, this is the peak of your adulthood in your 50s. This is going to represent, and this is where philosophy and religion and all sorts of arguments come up because not everyone can agree on what it means that there's eight pennies on the table. Someone can say, oh, that means that a genie made it come out of thin air. Someone can say, no, that means somebody lost their coins. Someone else can say, no, that means that someone put that there. So just this one perspective alone has divided the world for positive or worse with
Hmm.
all the different faith systems. And then now your interpretation of the meaning of an experience leads to Pisces, age 70 to death, of it answers the question, why? So this is what now creates our reasoning. It's the end of the experiment. It's like, okay, we analyzed that there were eight pennies on the table. We see that or we analyze from our experiment that if you pet a dog 5 times, it's going to, of course, like you more than if you don't pet it at all. Now
Mm,
we have created, we think this is because dogs love to be pet, right? What
yeah.
do? We start the experiment all over again. Now that we have our
Mm,
belief, we retest that theory. And then, of course, through constant analysis and experimentation. So, this is a process we do every single second of our lives because we're constantly perceiving. Gemini is the word, Sagittarius is the meaning of the word, Virgo is how, Pisces is why. And that's the circular nature of reasoning, inductive or deductive or psychically supernatural that we do. But of course, many of us, we make fallacies. We start to lie to ourselves. We're not really analyzing. And in a period like this, where everyone has an opinion, that's why it's going to be very dangerous. Uranus in
yeah.
Gemini, Sun in Gemini, everyone has an opinion. If you're supporting Israel, you support genocide. If you support Palestine, you support terrorism. Like everyone has these strong, crazy ideas, and that's what usually leads to war. It's what usually leads to conflict. There's nothing in Virgo but the South Node. So not everyone is really analyzing the information. They're reading the headlines and they're just running through with it. No one's really trying
Mm.
to synthesize the true meaning. Not to say that there won't be, but it just gives you an idea of how wonderfully chaotic everything is right now.
Yeah, it's like when storm came, so literally we're talking, like storm. So when the storm came, it's strong wind. So normally if that's, let's say, a very chill day, you're more grounded because, the wind is not going to pick you up. But when you have big storm, even though you want to try to stand your ground, you might gonna, blow to somewhere. And
It's
I
true.
feel that's actually really true. When I look at a Gemini, like myself, Gemini, I feel like this is probably the best time of my life is in this period of time. Seriously,
Okay.
because now finally, because everybody is experimental, I'm experimental, people more
Yeah.
open to new ideas. I'm like, yeah, this is best my life. And but for people who are, let's say, how to say that, Scorpio or somewhere like total different opposite side of Scorpio, actually not bad. Let's say people are Earth sign, probably will
Yeah.
have a little bit hard time because you want that stability.
Stability. Yeah.
You want to be understanding more of reasoning, but like no, we need to
Everything is all
go.
volatile.
Yeah, so you you
Yeah.
you you need to go running and thinking versus like when let me think and run.
Yeah.
No, you need to go flying to understand why you're flying. So
And while your emotion, the insight comes. I love that.
exactly. So I mean, this is beautiful to even start with my own personal crazy charts now to the this charts now I remember and I feel like this next 20 years. All right, good luck everybody.
Yeah. And it's important because the last 20 years, so from 2008 to 2024, if we look at Pluto through Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, these are the last three chapters of humanity,
Yeah.
or at least the cycle as we know it. So that 2008 to 2024 was the first round of the Hunger Games. Millions of
Mm.
people died. So
Yes.
like this next 20-year chapter, there will be mass extinction events. There are going to be so much. I mean, coming out of 2019, we had a mass extinction event with a certain animal species. So,
Yes.
not even so, that's something. And the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, the colonialism, the wars, the civil wars, like a lot of people died just because of the
Yes.
displacement and moving and of moving countries, establishing countries, war in those countries. So it's something to look forward to. When you said good luck, we're all gonna need it because this is gonna be very intense moving forward.
Yeah,
But
it's gonna shake everybody's life. I feel like, leading to, of course, 2019, 2020, it's, when your friends, family, somebody close to you, like they leave the world, you're like, it shook you to the core because otherwise just somebody, right? Happened something. But now this is even closer. It's gonna be in your life, your kids, whoever is very close to you. So you have no kind of like, okay, let me just go to my room, think about it. It's you are in it. We will be in it when there's a wind to pick up. That's why, like, I understand now, like the with the Gemini, the wind, Cancer, because we're leading to this season, June, right? We Jupiter is Cancer, Uranus is Gemini. I have some things here. I feel like there's a lot of emotional, and things gonna happen super fast, and it trigger
yeah,
a lot of emotional waves, and that you don't even know that you have it, right?
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
gonna be a shock for many people. So that's why when I say good luck, really mean it. We all need just grounding is so important. Know, I was always tell people, you gotta know who you are, then you know who you are not. So when you know
yeah,
who you are, it's just like the tree. My clients, I was like, ground yourself like a tree. I was like, storm coming here, break your branches, but you know your roots. You're not gonna go anywhere. You will be here, right?
amen. Yes,
So
sir.
I think that's the whole thing about, have you, I didn't know the how we gonna unfold or exactly what are we gonna go for it, but we're talking back to this grounding of how important to actually have more information so you have more choices, because a lot of time people don't know they have choices. They
Yeah,
don't know how to have those information that's solid gonna help them first infuse more fear. This is, I feel like we are helping people to prepare. What's your
yes,
next 3, 5, 10 years? Or let's not talk about 20 years, but at least what is for even for this year, for next year or two, what's gonna happen. So kind of like intentionally incorporating certain things gonna help you. If certain sign is the much easier to navigate, but with certain sign, it probably will need a little bit extra support, right? So you don't get blown away to somewhere, right?
hmm
Yeah,
and that's the most important thing you said this whole conversation, because some people do the opposite and they won't do anything if Mercury is retrograde. So it's important to know, like, the planets do not the planets don't dictate what you can or can't do. You co-create with the universe. So
exactly.
everyone is going to look at their meteorologist and they're going to look at the weather before they go out because they want to know if it's raining or not. The
That's right.
astrologer is just a space meteorologist. So we're giving you the zodiac weather. It's no different than looking at the time. It's no different than looking at the weather. Sometimes the weatherman gets it wrong because it's just his interpretation of the data. So when he predicts the weather, you don't call it psychic ability. So when we predict the
Reading.
astrology, right, it's just science. So we're giving you an idea and an interpretation of what the year looks like ahead, not so that you can decide, oh, this is what the planets have decided. It's if you know it's going to rain outside, you get to choose, do I want to wear a coat? Do I want to let the
Yes.
rain around on me? So it's always your power. It's always your decision as you, of course, dance with the rest of us in the collective.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Perfect.
bringing the
Yeah. So is there any information that I want to try to close the like this part of thing? And I have some fun question to ask you that I ask any guests. Okay. So is there anything you want to add? You know, we talked about what happened in the past, even from a couple hundred years ago, to
yeah.
what we are experiencing, why we experiencing what are we experiencing now, what are going to happen, right? So I feel like that's pretty like like pretty complete. Is there anything you will add on to maybe guide people are struggling or certain challenges people have, like, to conclude this part?
I would say the next 2 years is a highly volatile period.
Mm.
And once we step into end of 2026 and in 2027, things will really fix into place. And I say volatile because unlike like if we take human history, right? Out of all the amount of time humans have existed on this planet, for a relatively short recent period, we have developed technology that can blow this planet to complete crap. All right, and radiate everything. If we have mutually assured destruction, no one wants that to happen. I will never predict something like that happening, but it's possible. The mere fact that it is possible puts it on the table. So
Mm.
we have a wide variable volatility where we could see a large swath of the planet recovering from nuclear war, or in a miracle, we could create this utopia. It's a very broad and vague range, but that's what's represented through, as we can see, the North Node in Pisces is transitioning the last 3 years, right? 5 years, really. But if we go back to 2023, that was when Saturn originally went through Pisces. And the North Node was in Aries. Now Saturn is in Aries and the North Node is in Pisces. So
Hmm.
we're activating this new cycle while the North Node is transitioning us out of the old world. It's the best way to see it is we're out of the old world, we're into this new emerging world, right? So
Yeah,
basically, in between in Gemini, everything that we believe we're meant to be, right? And everything we believe we're meant to be, Gemini is having us align thoughts that align with these beliefs. And by Virgo season and December and Sag, we're going to analyze how we made that real. And we're going to see the meaning of where we're going into this new world, because a lot of people are not going to make it. They didn't sign the contract to, they chose not to
exactly.
make it.
Hmm.
They chose to do what they were meant to do in this old world, and they're done. Some of you were blessed with gifts. Some of you were blessed with unique attributes only you can understand because you chose to create this new world. Especially if we're in a space where a few people have to repopulate the whole globe, or at the very least, even if we bring in a new society, there's new ideas, new gifts, new talents that only you are going to be responsible for teaching the rest of the world as a part of this new ecosystem, culture, world system. So I would just, like you said, we're activating this new version of who we are, and you would really do yourself the best solid by staying true to it, departing from old traditional social expectations. The stuff that our grandparents and our parents were expected to do are not really what we're expected to do. In some cases, it may be opposite because it might have worked for them in their time, but the
Yeah.
same stuff that worked for them in their time could work against us in this time. So the extent to which you truly honor and align who you are, even if it puts you against established authorities and traditions, it will be worth it. In an ideal sense, it'll align with these things. But
Yes.
regardless of what happens, you will gain the most by honoring what has been revealed about who you are, what you're meant to do, and doing that at all costs. And take your time. If you don't figure that out in a day, you still have the rest of your life. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. When you say that, I keep uh, hearing, or there's a phrase coming, is this is the timing is ready for people to speak up, because I feel like it. And do you feel people's throat chakra is way open now? Like, even though,
Yeah.
because the thing is, it has a tuning. Okay, so we are not talking about what people say is more accurate or right or wrong. I'm just saying people are more boldly to stand up to. When I say, it's not just your voice; it's just how you express, how you walk the walk. Of course, how you write, how your arts. That's why this is the perfect timing to get that out of your system, because you cannot hold it any longer. So this is time, actually, because communication, right? At Gemini, communication, Mercury, it's all about expression, right? If I didn't get wrong. Then I feel like this is gonna, because when you express different way, it will give people different emotion to understand you even more,
Mhm.
because I see the cancer there, there to have you to, be even more people can understand who you truly are when you speak up, because a lot of time people are very internalized, but I feel like people now feel more comfortable and brave to speak up. So I just want to honor that. I think it's really beautiful time to ride with that wave, right?
And that was perfectly describing Uranus and Aries and Taurus. 2010 to 2018 was Uranus and Aries. 2018 to now is Uranus and Taurus. And those periods innovated the nature with which individuals can establish their own platforms. And
Yes.
that's why we have our, because before we needed gatekeepers. These things were gatekept from us. Now we could just create our own platforms, our own social media, and broadcast our voice. And that's where from 2018, the Tauruses like Candace Owens, DJ Academics, Tucker Carlson, very
Yes.
polarizing figures and individuals pioneered sharing your values on these platforms. They weren't the only ones to do it, but they were
Yes.
major examples of why a lot of us are able to speak so much more freely now, saying the stuff people are afraid to say. And now that these values have been established, it's going to be a free for all. We're going to be hearing people saying the most racist, negative stuff
Yes,
towards
that's
each
true.
other at all angles. People were afraid of saying before, they're going to say freely. Me, I think that's amazing because it's like you said, it's necessary, I think, to bring out this conflict so that people can be more honest about what they don't like about each other,
Yes.
and so that these conflicts, war or not, will happen. We get it out the way. But it's also going to be a revolutionary period with revolutionary ideas and thoughts that spark people's minds and hearts and pushes them to get out the house more and to do something about the issues they're complaining about.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is, I mean, it's already 2 hours. I didn't know how time goes. Okay. But I think it's
Yeah.
worth it. Thank you so much. I had such a pleasure. Always, I can talk to you for hours about. Next time, I'm going to have you come back and actually talk about some psychic ability, like certain
Okay.
things that I feel like that's another mystery things that I think you possess, and then I possess something. I don't know what the
Oh,
what
yeah.
the what the theme will be, but I think we're gonna probably have people to explore their psychic ability, maybe through their natal charts to like because you read so many. You're like, okay,
Mhm.
if you are just 29 degrees of what with 0 degree what, you probably need to check this psychic ability. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting to actually talk about that. But
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
to wrap up here, I have three questions I'm going to ask you that I ask my guests. First
Cool.
one is, if you use three words to describe yourself, what those three words would be to describe
Mm.
yourself? Yeah,
I would say um solid, or I guess you could say loyal,
yeah.
um honest, and or honest slash crazy, and then um what's the last word? I guess organized. I mean, I don't feel organized, but I would say ooh, decisive, determined.
Yeah, decisive. Yeah, determined. Okay, I see the Gemini traits there, but I also see the
Mhm.
Capricorn is like very organized, solid. Crazy.
Yeah.
If you're a Gemini, you definitely need to be crazy, a little bit crazy, because
I'd
otherwise you're
say
gonna twist it.
genius. I like to
Genius.
say, yeah, or unconventional. I wanted to do one word for each, my sun, moon, and rising.
Ah, see,
Yeah.
that's perfect. Okay, the second question is, if you could go back to meet your 5 years old version of you, what would you say to him?
Oh, such a good question. 5-year-old me,
Yeah.
shoot, I would tell 5-year-old me, um, that you know a lot more than you even know you know, and to just allow yourself, don't try and I'd tell 5-year-old me, please don't try and figure everything out, because everything that you thought you had to know, the answer is going to come to you, and you have more answers within yourself. So listen to yourself more. uh you know s- believe more in what you think, and say more, and not give that power away to others. But yeah. I'll
Perfect.
definitely say.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's very deep of, what you said. The last one is, what is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Oh, good, great. Such a good question. Because, questioning what success means to me has transformed so many different times.
Mm-hmm.
Fulfillment to me in life is living in a way that doesn't compromise who you are. So if you conventionally have all the things people want to be successful, but you can't really be you, you can't really enjoy, you can't say the thoughts that you want, you can't necessarily like, and I mean like outside, if it's a contractual agreement and honoring that agreement, you can't do certain things, cool, that's work. But even outside of that, if you can't necessarily, you know, be who you truly are, if in maintaining all of this success, in order to keep that success, if you have to be someone you're not, that's not fulfillment, that's misery. Even if you're just lying to yourself to maintain it. So fulfillment to me is being fully present and being fully understanding and accepting of who I am, whether I'm homeless on the street or I have 16 mansions. It's just, I used to think fulfillment was tied in. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to have this, I have to have this. But I'm realizing fulfillment is being able to be who you are and what you want to be, without letting anything external get in the
Yes.
way, without making an excuse for why you can't have what you want right now.
Yeah,
Per-
I feel like you touch on something very interesting that I went through as well, is because I'm a couple years older than you. I feel like that in life when you have kids, when you're older, like certain things is shifting, changing because when you understand what's the meaning of death. So a lot of external things that we are slowly kind of like, move into the internal, right? Internally, what is more fulfilling? That's why fulfilling is feeling internally.
Yeah.
Success is the external, a lot of things that are earthling, the way of seeing things, right? But fulfilling is from internal. So it's really beautiful. Well, man, I really don't want to finish here, but I really, really thank you, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation as well. And again, how people can find you, how they reach out to you. Like I know your Instagram, but what's your website or how they
My
book session
website
with you?
is www.thepeacedealer.com. If you go to my reports or consultation section, which you'll see on the website, you can order a consultation, you could order a report. If you're watching this during Gemini season, the 70% off is automatic. It expires on the 21st. But
Ooh,
even
okay.
if you're not, shoot me an email if you want a discount code. I got you. And I'm also launching an app at the end of June, around June 25th. It's called Supernatural. So if you go to supernatural.passion.io, you can access the application right now and join the membership. Albeit, even if you don't join, there are plenty of material on there for free that you can watch without even having to join. I highly recommend it. I'm going to pour more of my content into there. The stuff I put out on YouTube will come out exclusively earlier on there. So I highly recommend, yeah, check that out. And
So
I'm also on the piece
go, sorry, keep going.
and YouTube. Oh no, were you asking about the app?
Yeah. So what is this supernatural app about? Like what is this mainly about?
So, there's several products on there that really kind of function like it's really a more personal space to
Mm,
kind of absorb my content and to gain
got it.
more material. So if you're already following me on YouTube, most, if not all the content will be on the app, and I have exclusive series that you can watch on the app before it even comes out on YouTube, perhaps even weeks earlier. And I also have my Astro 101, 102, 103, 104, and 105 course. So if you join the app, you'll have access to those courses. Astro 101 is Meet the Planets. Astro 102 is Enter the Zodiac, teach you about the signs. Astro 103 is Astrological Houses. Astro 104 is uh planetary aspects. So in 104, we teach you how to calculate, what it means that the moon is 3 degrees and Saturn is 1 degree.
Mm.
The moon is making a 242 degree to the Saturn. What does that interpret? So we're going to teach what all those aspects means. Then for 105, natal chart analysis, we'll combine 101 to 104 and we'll teach you how to read a natal chart. So with those 5 courses, you already know how to speak the language of astrology. And I'm still working on those courses, but most of them will be done by July, and then we'll build from there. Should be
Awesome. You
cool.
see, you know that I will sign up, right? Because I feel like I'm I want to do learn those things. Probably I had this itch for last couple years. It just couldn't. First of all, I couldn't find it. Not say couldn't. I checked some courses. I just this doesn't make any sense to me. Like when I
Yeah.
say Gemini doesn't make no sense. I cannot learn the things that make no sense to me. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna check out that because I feel like this is something so awesome that I can use scientific way and also my intuitive way. And then, because I already know we are in a new world, I just don't know. I just cannot
Right.
back up my feelings, but I intuitively, I already know.
Yep.
But when you say that, I was like, okay, that makes sense because now I feel like, okay, I'm on point. You know what I'm saying?
And and we do have 5 courses, but
Yeah.
we'll be adding new courses like every few months and whatnot. So
Cool.
the what you see on the app is what's there now, but it will be growing as we grow. So looking
Yeah.
forward.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, if you guys you want to have the discount for the in the Gemini season, then feel free to check it out. I will also check out as well. And well, thank you, Michael, peace dealer, whoever, whichever you prefer. But it's such a great pleasure to talking to you, and we talk in the Gemini season. And I feel like I don't know whether you choose this date perfectly. I didn't have no idea June 9th what June 9th mean or what's going on. I know supermoon is coming, but I didn't tap too much into of those dates. But I think you
You
chose
picked
the
the
perfect
perfect date?
day. Huh?
Oh, okay, word. Well, yeah. What I like you. I didn't expect this to be the day the things will happen, but we picked the perfect day to do this. So
I know. I
let's.
That's why I say it's, and I supposed to have a 6 p.m. meeting. But my board members they're like, well, we're not available. I was like, you guys want to reschedule? So we schedule our board meeting next week because otherwise 6 p.m.
Wow.
I have to be 6 p.m. But now it's already 7 p.m. So if I have board meeting,
Yeah.
I will not be able to on it. So universe like, hey, Gina, you think you're gonna wrap up a conversation in an hour? No way. So they moved it for me. So I'm like, I don't even have to worry. I'll just keep talking because that's the only thing, like this
It
evening on
didn't
my
feel
calendar.
like 2 hours. It flew by. That was
I
so
know we
fun.
went through some portals. So yeah.